Hi everyone. In this tutorial, we're going to move on to working with the P5 library. So if you go to p5.js.org, it should take you to this home page. And we are going to start using the library, which is a set of JavaScript functions, which they have created for us in order to work with the Canvas element in a way that's a little bit faster and a little bit more intuitive for visual language. So the first thing that we're going to do is go to the Get Started page. And there's a couple of different ways to use the P5 library. One is to use the online editor, which you can click on here, and it already has the library loaded, and you can test out things here and preview them here if you hit play. And so this is a good kind of sketch pad to use, but we're going to use our glitch projects because that's where we can host our projects and do a little bit more with them. We'll come back to the editor later. But if you scroll down here, it also tells us that we can tell us about writing a program, and it tells us about setting up an editor in our own computer, but we're going to go down to using a hosted version of the P5 library because we're going to put this into our glitch script glitch page header tag. So go to this piece of code underneath using a hosted version of the P5 library and copy it. And now go to your glitch page, your glitch account, and start a new project. I already have one started here. So I took away the JavaScript file and I took away everything that was in the body of their template. And so I now just have this empty page. But up here, I'm going to import that JavaScript P5 library by copying and pasting it here. So I just went here, hit copy. You can also Command C, copy it here, and then bring it into your header tag. So that is in here. I'll put hello P5 in my title. It's all in the head. So that will load in the library with all the functions that they've already written for us to use. And then we can just use them in our script. So now we need a script. So let's go to new file and write sketch.js. And that's what we call P5 sketches are it's just the convention for what we call different kinds of programs that are written with P5. So in our body and our index page, we need to also add in a script tag, and the source is now sketch.js. And that's going to pull in our P5 sketch into a Canvas element. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do is set up our canvas, and the P5 library has created a function for that. So instead of creating the canvas element in on the HTML page and then bringing it in with JavaScript in our script file with the method, with the call method, we just use the P5 function. So we're going to write function setup, parentheses, curly brackets, and create canvas. So this is something you're going to do each time you set up a P5 sketch. You have to create the canvas in a function setup. So this is giving, it's creating the canvas element on our HTML page, and it is making it 600 by 600 pixels. And this could be anything. It can be 400 or 300, whatever you want. And I have in my style, I've already put in a border so that you can see it. If I take this away, there's no stroke along the border. So if you go to the CSS and add in the border, then you can see the border for your canvas there. So I did that so that we could see it for now, but we don't need it necessarily, just so we know that it's there and that things are working. Okay, so that's the first thing that we need. And you always need these two functions. So function setup is always there to set up our canvas. And then we write function draw. And this is calling the context of our canvas, basically. And all of the things that we're going to do that show up inside of our canvas go inside of the draw function. So here now we can look at some of their references for their functions that they've already written for us. So if we go down to shape, we see that there is an ellipse function, and we just have to write ellipse and then X and Y point for the position, which is the coordinate position of the center of the ellipse, and the width and the height. And then we see that there's a circle, which we can do and write the point for the middle of the circle to go its position, and then the diameter is 20. So let's add in an ellipse. And you can also make a circle with an ellipse. So we can do an ellipse and the position at 100, 100, and then 40 and 60. And so that is, center is 100 pixels over and 100 pixels down. And we have 40 wide and 60 high. If I did just 40, it's going to do 40 and 40, so it's going to make a circle that way. Or I could write circle. We'll do 200 and 240. And that's essentially the same thing. So I just use the ellipse. Okay, so by default, P5 gives us a, what is it called? A stroke around this. So even if I take this away, it still gives me a stroke by default for anything that I draw inside of the canvas. So when I added this stroke of the canvas, that's just the border there. P5 will automatically give us a stroke for all the things that we draw. So we don't have to do that, which is something we had to do if we are just working with the canvas element. And now I can do different things. So I can fill the ellipse with a color and make it something like red. Or I can use my hexadecimal colors and grab the hex code here and copy and paste that here. And we'll fill it in with that. Or I can use the RGB or the HSB, which we'll look at in the next example. So I can do also a rectangle, which if we look at their reference is a little bit different than the rectangle, how the rectangle works. So we just write rectangle, and then 30, 30 is the position, and that's the corner position. And then 55, 55 is the length and width for a square. It also gives us a few different things. So we could round the corners with another parameter. So 20% rounds the corners, or we can do different things with the different corners and write it all out. And then here we have also a rect mode function, which would change the way that it's drawn from the corner, from the center. If we click on that, it will tell us more. So there's the corner, the radius, or the center. So now if I do a rectangle that is over 300 and 200 and 55, 55. Or I can do a rectangle at 0 and 0 and make it 40 and 75. So you can see the 0 and the 0 is up at the corner here. If I change the rect mode to something like center, I can change it up here. Or here. So let's see if that. Yeah, okay, so I can change it. If I change it here, it's going to change where this is drawn. So it's at 0, 0. The middle is at 0, 0. So it's off of the canvas now. So I have to move this over. So if I move this over 100 and 100, it's going to go where the ellipse is because it's now drawing it from the center. Whereas if it's not that mode, it's going to be that corner. So you can see like the corner, the upper left-hand corner of the rectangle is now in the center of the ellipse because the center point of the ellipse is where how that by default gets positioned. The rectangle by default gets positioned by its corner unless I tell it to change the rect mode to the center. They also have radius. Let's see what that does. Weird. Okay. So that's what the rect mode is. And I can change the fill of each of these. If I now make this, I can change this to blue. And everything below. So I've made the fill this purple color, and then I made an ellipse, and then I changed the fill to blue, and I made 2 rectangles. So the 2 rectangles are blue because the fill is blue. And now I can make the fill yellow and add in another rectangle, and I'll put it at, let's see, 250, and I'll put it down 50 and make it 200 wide. Now let's make it 75 wide and 20 tall. And I can also change the stroke on that. So I can change the stroke and then just write in the color here. So now it's changing the stroke of the rectangle here and also everything that is after it because it is going back around since I didn't have a stroke in there. So if I want a different stroke, so over here I would write the stroke blue. And now this is going to be blue until it's red. And I can add in another stroke here and do yellow. So this one is a purple fill with a blue stroke. And I could also put in nothing. Oh, I can put nothing. Well, I'll just put it back to blue. Okay, so this one has a blue stroke. This one has an purple fill, and that's the ellipse, blue, yellow, and then, you know, as I change it, it just updates what comes after it. So the other thing that I can start to do is make some lines. So here I'll put in the comment here is ellipse, and here are rectangles. And then here we will do lines. So for a line, all we have to write is line. And then the first point is the X and Y coordinate of the first point. And then let's see, that's 200 and 250. Let's put one at over to, I don't know, let's do 100 and 150 and see what that does. Okay, so it's starting the line over at 200 and 250 down over here. So this is the first point, and then 100 and 150 down. So 100 over and 150 down. So that is the second point. So I can then continue the line and start it at 100 and 150, which was the last point, and then put it over to 200 again, but put it up to 100. So now it's going from here to here to here. And now I can do a line from 200 and 100 and then put it over to, so it's going here to here, it's 200, 100. Let's go to 50 and 50. So I can keep drawing it that way, or I can also just draw a line on its own. And let's put it over at 300 and 275. And then at 100 and 175. So that's now just drawing a separate line and not connecting them. I can also change the color of the line by changing the stroke. So I could change the stroke now to, let's get HTML color, something like this pink, so we can see it different. And I can also change the stroke weight, something thicker, but now it's going to change all of my stroke weight. So I have to add in a stroke weight up here at the top. Stroke weight 1. Now all of the stroke weights will be 1 until it gets to the stroke weight 2 and make that a thicker line. So I could make that even thicker. Stroke weight 5. And then maybe here we'll do stroke weight of 3. 2. It's too thick. Okay, so I have different stroke weights, different fills, and different shapes. So lines, ellipse, and rectangles. The other thing that I can do that is cool, and easier with P5 is I can make different variables, things that are not just the points of the grid of the location. So for example, I can make an ellipse that has a mouse. Let's see, let's do mouse X and mouse Y. So that's the position of the ellipse is going to be wherever the X coordinate of my mouse is and wherever the X coordinate of, or the Y coordinate of my mouse is. And that's something that is a variable that the P5 library has already created for us. So it automatically stores that. And then I can make the size, whatever size I want. So I could do 60 and 40. And let's make the fill. Let's get a color. Do another color we haven't used yet. Maybe this. I don't know, maybe this. The light pink. Okay. So now when I go over here, oh, the stroke is really thick. It's going to create a ellipse wherever my mouse goes. So on that X and Y, it's going to create that. So let's change that stroke weight. One. Okay, so I have that, and I can do a few of these. So I could do another one that is 40 and 60, and maybe we'll do this color as just yellow. I think we can just write no stroke if we want no stroke. Yeah, so now it has this kind of weird shape. It's like designing a paintbrush. So you can see why artists like to work with the P5 because it's very visual based. And now this one we will do, let's do something like that color. And we can make this something like, let's see what it looks like, 110. Oh, it looks like a weird little flying saucer. So I could keep adding to this and just have this be something that I fill up on the page, and it's continuing to fill this in over and over again because there's no background. If I add a background up at the top, for example, I could put a black background, Just 0 is black for RGB. Now when I move it around, the background keeps updating. And so it doesn't make this shape everywhere. I move my mouse. It does, but the background keeps updating as this keeps updating. So it erases it. I can also make the background 255, which will be white. And it's updating that over and over again because this is going through a loop. So every time it's going through this program, it's creating a background, it's creating this ellipse, it's creating these rectangles, all of these things, the fill, the stroke, it's creating these lines. And then here I'm going to put I'm just going to call them brushes. It's creating the brushes. And then when it finishes creating that, it finishes here, and then it goes back to the top. And then it goes over and again. And it keeps updating, going over and over again, unless I tell it not to, which I could do if I put no loop. But then it's not going to do anything over here. That's just going to be stuck up there because I have this as a mouse thing. So if I don't want it to loop, I can put no loop. And if I want it to just be attached to my mouse, then I would put the background up here. If I put the background all the way down here, the background is going to overwrite everything. So the order matters of where I put these things because that's the order of the instructions of the program. Okay, so we're going to do another example and create another sketch. By the way, these are going to happen, and it's because we have this script source is a hosted CDN and on a CDN, and it's just ignore that. It says that it's not defined, but it is defined. It's just in here, so don't worry about that. Okay, so that is how this works. Now let's go to new file and do sketch2.js and add this file. And then in our index, change it to sketch2. So we're going to create another program, another sketch, and we're going to do function setup because this is what we do every time. And curly brackets. And we're going to do create canvas. And I'm going to do 720 and 720. And this is an example from the reading from the book that they do. So they create the canvas, and then we have function draw. Oops. And these are always the two things that we need to set up our sketch. They also add the color mode. So the color mode that is in the sketch they have is the HSB color mode. And HSB stands for hue, saturation, and brightness. And by default, the color mode is RGB in P5. So if you want to change the color mode, you have to put color mode and change it to the HSB mode. And the HSB mode is, so the hue is on a 360 degree. It's like the color wheel. So that's what the numbers represent, the degree on the color wheel that where the color is located. Saturation is 100 and brightness is out of 100. So it's from 0 to 100 are the options for saturation, and from 0 to 100 are the options for brightness, and then 0 to 360 are the hue. So the hue is like the color, saturation is how much color, brightness is how bright. So we put the mode HSB, and this is the max is 360, the max is 100, and the max is 100. I could change this and make it so that it never goes above 50 as the max for my saturation. So let's say I wanted all my colors and my color space to be in this more kind of pastel-ish range. Then I would set my saturation max to 50. But I'm going to set it at 100 so that I have more colors to work with. And then the rect mode is going to be center, and that's where the rectangle, all the rectangles will be drawn, where the position point will be from the center instead of the corner. And then they have no stroke on anything. So whatever I put in this setup is going to apply to everything in my sketch, in my drawing that I create inside of it. So if I want this to apply to the whole thing in here, then I put it in my setup, because this is what I set up, and I set it up once. And then anything that goes into my draw function is the graphics, which go through that loop over and over again. So this sets up once, and then the draw is a loop. So now we have the background, and their example is written as mouse y divided by 2. I think this is our example. It's similar anyways. 100, 100. So this means that wherever my mouse is moving, it's going to be the color of the background based on the Y position. So that's the up and down. And it's divided by 2. And that's because my canvas is 720. So it's twice of 360. And that is so that this color wheel stretches out for the whole length of this. If I made this not divided by 2 and just the Y, it'll get to 360 about halfway through, which is where it's going to turn red around here. And then it's just going to stay red as I go down here because I've reached 360. And on my color wheel, I go past 360 to 400. It's not going to keep going around. It's just going to stay at that color. So because this is 720, this is divided by 2 so that the 360 is spread out across this. I could do this and just make this more simple and make it 360 by 360. And then I don't have to divide this by 2. So that when I go all the way down here, it's going to give me that full range of the color wheel. So that's how that is working. And it doesn't have to be perfect. I could make this 800 and whatever, it doesn't matter. There's not a particular reason why it has to, it could be red for longer down there, but it just kind of depends on what you want it to do. There's no really like right or wrong way to do it. It just depends on what you want here. So let's see. Okay, so I'm going to also now draw a rectangle, and inside of the rectangle, I'm going to position it at 360, 360. So that's the middle point is going to go halfway and halfway and be right in the middle of this. And then it's going to draw the rectangle based on the movement of my mouse. So it's going to be mouse X plus 1 is what they have, and then mouse X again plus 1. So as I move my mouse over to the right and left, it is creating the width and height of the square. So let's see what happens if we take away this plus 1. Okay, so it goes all the way over. So I think that this plus 1 here is just adding a little bit at the end for some reason. I don't know why. But it's moving it. It's getting bigger as I go to the right because the X gets bigger as I go to the right. And so now I can change the fill of that rectangle to also change with the color. So if I do 360 minus the mouse Y position divided by 2, and then 100 and 100. And again, I'm getting this from the example in the book. The color inside of the rectangle changes as my mouse moves and also changes the size as my mouse moves. And so the reason why they did this, so the background is changing as I move my mouse up and down. So you can see if I diagonal up and down. So if I had this the same, the mouse Y, the fill, this is the hue, remember? So this number is the hue and this is the brightness and the saturation. So the brightness and the saturation are staying the same, but I don't want it to be the same color inside. So I have to do something to make it different than the color inside. So I could do that in a number of ways. I could do what they did here. I could just add use a different number, 100. And then the Y is going to change. Let's see, the mouse Y divided by, well, anyways, that's how we get the different colors and the different size as we move the mouse. Okay, so these are the 2 intro sketches to P5. And if you play around a little bit with the colors and the rectangles and the shapes and get used to how the structure of the program is, which is always a function setup and a function draw. We always have these 2. Then go on to the next tutorial. We'll do one more color example, which will also relate to the assignment that you have to complete. Okay, see you soon.